writing a lot lately about the dreaded CBDCs and the concept of the weaponization of the dollar. So I want you to tell folks at home, what do you mean? What is weaponizing the dollar?
So basically, it's just using the dollar as a foreign policy tool. So the US has economic power. The dollar is the reserve currency. Everybody needs dollars. And so the United States can cut off access to dollars to punish wayward countries for doing things that they don't like. For instance, after Russia invaded Ukraine, the United States and most of her Western allies froze all of Russia's assets. And that means that Russia can't access those assets. Now they're floating the idea, and Janet Yellen actually brought this up publicly a couple of weeks ago. They want to unfreeze those assets and basically just give them to Ukraine. So you might say that they're talking about stealing Russia's assets. And you might justify that. You might say, well, that's fine because Russia's bad and Russia invaded Ukraine. But the reason we call it the weaponization of the dollar is because other countries are watching this. And you know, if I have control of something that you have, and you know that I'm going to use that to manipulate you, what are you going to do with that thing?
Sure, yeah. Well, I want to keep it away from you.
Yeah, exactly. You're gonna try to get rid of it, right?
Yeah.
Well,
I think hold on a second, because I think that's there's a little bit of confusion there. Is that if somebody says, because we heard this too with Iran, right? It's like, oh well, Iran has frozen assets, and then the U.S. decides what to do with them or to give them back, which by the way kind of implies that they took them. Just FYI, or in the example you're using, they froze Russia's assets. Now, besides the fact that it's really cold in Russia, so I don't think that's the kind of frozen you're talking about. How does that process happen? Like, how does a Western nations, in this case the United States, have control of assets of Russia's to begin with that they can freeze? How do you even go about doing that?
Well, there's a lot of ways within the financial system and globally that the United States can exert influence. And one of the most powerful things is this system called SWIFT. And I can't remember the acronym off the top of my head, but basically it's a giant electronic network that facilitates global payments all across the world. And because the dollar is the world's reserve currency, the SWIFT system runs on dollars. And therefore, because the U.S. controls the dollars, it can actually shut countries out of that SWIFT system. And that's what they've done with Russia. Russia simply can't do business. So they have to find alternatives in order to facilitate business. And of course they do, but it's inconvenience for them. And why would you want to put up with that? So why not just create your own payment systems that are based on rubles or yen or yuan or gold or whatever? And so that's the difficulty of using the dollar as a weapon. Other countries see it. They're like, we don't want to be manipulated. Let's just get rid of dollars. And that's a big problem for the United States, because one of the ways the U.S. has been able to continue to borrow and spend at the tremendous level that it has is because there's a great demand for dollars around the world, because dollars facilitate global trade. If China's buying something from Saudi Arabia, they convert it to dollars and then do the business. If you don't need dollars, then demand for dollars will drop and the value of the dollar will drop. So we're kind of playing with fire. And I say we, I mean the government. I don't have anything to do with it, but kind of playing with fire in that if you're undermining demand for your own thing, for your dollars, that could significantly alter the U.S. economy in the future. If enough countries say, you know what, we're done with the dollar, we're going to use some alternative, the inflationary pressure in the United States would be tremendous.
Well, I think one of the times you've been on the show in the past, we talked about, and forgive me using such a heavy term, but regime uncertainty, where, if a country, say the aforementioned Iran or a Russia or a China or anyone else, if they were to sign a treaty for trade or nuclear armament or what have you with the U.S. government during one particular presidential administration, and then 4/8 years later, the next administration comes in and says, "Oh no, this isn't good anymore," and tears it up. Then as you put it, the world is watching, right? So then why would any country enter into any agreement with the United States after that?
Right. And it's interesting because most people, when you talk about weaponization of the dollar and de-dollarization, which is kind of what goes along with it, and that means using other currencies instead of the dollar, so replacing the dollar with other things. Usually, when you talk about that, you think of enemies of the United States. You think of China, who incidentally is buying a lot of gold right now, or you think of Russia or Iran. But back during the Trump or the early years of the administration, the Trump administration, when they tore up the Iran nuclear treaty, the European Union wasn't real keen on that. And so they actually created an alternative payment system so that they could continue to do business with Iran using euros instead of dollars. So it's not just, enemies. It could also be allies. I mean, nobody wants to have a billy club hanging over their head. And that's the danger. If you use a hammer, there's always the chance it's going to swing back and hit you. And I think that that's the risk that the U.S. is playing when it uses the dollar as basically a weapon.
Well, kind of as a brief segue here, so let's talk a minute about CBDCs, which is central bank digital currency, if I get that correct. So what is a CBDC? Because I think a lot of people, when they hear that phrase or when they see it talked about on the news, they think to themselves, well, wait a minute, I don't have any cash in my wallet. I just use a debit card and it just comes out of my account and goes into their account. Well, it was all done with ones and zeros online. Isn't that a central bank digital currency? I don't understand the difference.
Well, it is there is some similarity, and there really is a broader movement globally to get rid of cash. Because if you and I do a transaction in cash, nobody can trace that transaction, right? I mean, unless somebody actually saw it and took pictures. When we do business,
I can promise you there's no pictures out there with me having money, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, and so if you're doing, transaction through a bank using a bank card, then there's a record. Central bank digital currency takes that to a whole nother level. It's basically a digital dollar. It is issued by the central bank, and it is fully traceable from front to back end with it's basically like Bitcoin. Most people are probably familiar with Bitcoin. It's done on this thing called the blockchain. And you can go back and you can look at every change of hands that Bitcoin has gone through. A central bank digital currency would allow the US government to do the exact same thing. And since everything is controlled within that closed system, then the control that they can have over you is tremendous. I mean, first off, just tracking. They could find out when you go get your coffee at Starbucks, which might not matter, or they could find out when you go buy your AR-15 or go get an abortion. So lots of ways to track what you're doing. And then there's the whole potential of them being able to just basically turn off your money, which you have some risk of that in the normal commercial banking system, although banks are ostensibly private. A central bank digital currency is controlled directly by the government. So if you were to run afoul of the government, they could just say, well, Alan Mosley, we're going to turn off your money. Not that you have any, but if you did, they could turn it off.
Oh, no.
I went there.
No, that's okay. Well, so that kind of gets me thinking, because you had mentioned earlier talking about some of the different forms of transactions and different countries around the world doing de-dollarization, saying, well, fine, if you're going to take your ball and go home, then we'll figure out other ways of transacting with one another. I think something sort of the boogeyman in the room, right, is the infamous, the almost mythical at this point collapse of the dollar. Oh, the whole rest of the world's going to quit accepting dollars and the dollar's going to collapse and it's not going to be the global reserve currency anymore. So I want you to talk, if you could, because I know that's a really big topic in of itself, but kind of give us some insight into sort of this like double-edged sort of conversation of, on the one hand, there's lots of people looking for ways of transacting without using dollars. You think of cryptocurrency, for instance. People think, well, the dollar's bad and we feel like it's going to eventually collapse anyway, so we're going to figure out other methods. And yet at the same time, if you and I woke up tomorrow morning and the dollar had collapsed and the rest of the world wasn't accepting it, that would be, I mean, an economic doomsday for all of us. I mean, globally, it would be an economic doomsday. So try for us, like, again, I know I'm giving you like, oh, this is like 2 sentences max from Maharrey, but try to square the circle of, on the one hand, people are almost purposely poking barbs at the dollar, but on the other hand, if the dollar were to collapse tomorrow, we'd be doomed.
Yeah, it is kind of a double-edged sword. And I think that kind of the answer to that question lies in the how does this play out, right? Because I do think ultimately the dollar is doomed. All fiat currencies are doomed because governments can't resist the temptation to continue to create more of it. And that's the beauty of something like a gold standard or a commodity-based money. There's a finite amount that you can expand it. But if you have just fiat money that's backed by nothing, you can create it infinitely. Governments can't resist that temptation. So eventually they inflate away its value. And every fiat currency ultimately has failed. And the dollar will eventually fail too. But I don't think it's going to be like we wake up tomorrow and all of a sudden, you read the headline on Yahoo News, the dollar has collapsed. I think you're looking at something that's going to play out a long time over time, a slow decline, as empires typically do. And you're going to see the value of the dollar slowly degrade, the US's power in the world slowly devolve away. And eventually you'll wake up one day and realize, oh my gosh, the dollar's collapsed. It's one of those things that they talk about how things happen slowly and then all at once. I think it's very slowly. And then at some point, there's going to be that tipping point. But I don't think it's going to happen fast. And I think people are wise to find alternatives to the dollar, alternatives to anything. And really, in my opinion, that's how money should be set. It shouldn't be set by the government or some institution or some PhD somewhere. Money should evolve, as money did in the past, out of the market. What do people want to use? What do people find to be the best money? Historically, gold and silver have been considered sound, good money. There may be something else, but let those things compete in the marketplace. Right now, we have a monopoly on money where governments control all of it, and we see the results of it. We see profligate spending. We see unsustainable debt. We see booms and busts and collapses, and that's going to continue until we have sound money. So I think that we need to be aware of what's going on with the dollar. I don't think we need to panic about it. I don't think, that you need to go take all your money out of the bank and, buy silver bars. But if you want to, go to moneymetals.com because that's the place to buy your silver bars. But I do think that we're seeing this slow degradation of the dollar, more and more people wanting to find alternatives. And I think in the near term, we may see more of a system where there are multiple reserve currencies with the dollar having a little less. And again, that's going to cause problems for our economy because as the world depends less on the dollar, we're not going to be able to print as many. And that's a problem for a government that can't seem to get it.
Which of these two options would you rather have? $1 million of Bitcoin or $1 million of gold and silver?
Oh, I can't have both.
Nope, you got to pick one. You're getting $1 million, but you can only accept it in one of those two ways. And you can't mix them either. No diversifying the portfolio, A or B.
All right. Well, I'm going hard money. I'm going gold and silver.
Okay. Do you want to say why, or do you want to say screw them?
I mean, I am not anti-Bitcoin or anti-crypto. I'm not Peter Schiff. But I do know that gold and silver have stood the test of time. They've been money for 5,000 years. They have all of the attributes of money. And if you look at over time, they tend to hold their value. I don't think that gold and silver are necessarily good investments because they're non-yielding, but they do hold their value. An ounce of gold would buy you a fine suit in 1900, and an ounce of gold will buy you a fine suit today. So I'm going to go with that confidence, and not that I'm dissing Bitcoin or crypto, but if I'm taking $1 million, I want to be confident that I'm still going to have $1 million in 10 years. So I'm going to go with the hard money.
All right. Okay. We'll accept that. Crypto Bros, the comment section is below. That's at Mike Maharrey. All right. The next question, Mike. I know you saw it because you retweeted it. I actually put up a poll this past week. That the inspiration for the poll was this whole business going on with the Boeing whistleblower and all that stuff, who was found tragically having killed himself after blowing the whistle on Boeing and being excited to testify against him. Imagine that. What a change of heart he had. Which leads me to this poll right here. Do you believe the American ruling class, be it government, military, industrial complex, corporations, whatever, do they have people murdered? Now, this is not meant to be they have ever. This is they are currently doing so. Now, 96.5% of the respondents said, yeah, the Illuminati is picking us off one by one. Sure, why not? And 3.5% are, in fact, the killers in this right. in this poll. Mike Maharrey, does your government kill people?
Absolutely. I've already voted. I'm in the, what was that, 95.6? Yeah. I'm in that group. I'm not in the killer group. I'm in the killed group. So
okay.
I don't even think it's that cynical in this day and age. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe just because I'm cynical, but I mean that I wouldn't even hesitate. It's not even something that makes me go, I'm certain they do. If not domestically, and I think they probably do domestically, but certainly they're often people overseas.
Yeah, well, so that's the thing, is that I think overwhelmingly people know, oh yeah, well, you know, be it the CIA or just the military in general, sure, we're drone striking people left and right, and there's always collateral damage. So if you're counting that, then it's an obvious slam dunk. But for the spirit of the poll really more is, do you think there are extrajudicial killings of American citizens on American soil?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I just don't even hesitate with that. I mean, we're talking about a CIA that experimented with LSD on its own people. You know, I mean, yeah. There are no scruples here. You know, and you've got these people like, it's for the better good, the greater good. So
no, we're not even doing greater. It's just better at this point.
It's just better. Yeah. Yeah. Or it's for the average.
Yeah. All right. Well, boy, I didn't mince words with that one. All right. So what was it? A couple of weeks ago now, I did a little segment on Aaron Bushnell, which was the young airman who self-immolated, which is really just too metal of a word to say, tragically set themselves on fire in protest of Israel's actions in Gaza and against the Palestinians. And that, of course, sparked a lot of conversation online. A lot of people on one side saying basically, well, this guy's just mentally ill, and people on the other side saying that, oh, well, this was quite a protest. And of course, he's not the first person to have ever done that. Thinking back famously to the war in Vietnam. But my take on it was more of If that were one of my loved ones, I would be very disappointed in their actions. I'm not going to lie to you, because as I cynically say, I think that's something you and I have very much in common is, you know, gosh, Maharrey, it's been a couple of weeks since he died and Palestine still isn't free. Imagine that.
Right.
What was your take on that?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. You know, we live in a world that loves symbolism. You might say symbolism over substance. And it was certainly a vivid symbolic act. And you can't deny that it sparked discussion. But did it spark real change? Or did it even change anybody's mind? I doubt it. And you know, I've had this discussion in private. I mean, there's a lot of things that he could have done beyond setting himself on fire to make the situation better. And I think you mentioned, you know, stand in front of the Army Recruiting Center and talk young men out of joining up for the Empire Brigades. So, yeah, I think that it's a little bit sick and twisted, and it's, you know, certainly sensational. And I'm not going to deny that it created a stir, but I think it was unfortunately symbolism over substance. And I mean, I hate to say that and denigrate the guy's life, but I don't know. I'm with you on that. I think there are better, more effective ways, but those are hard ways. People don't want to do the work. It's like
Yes.
it's like people who want to complain about the person in office or the bill. Let's use that as an example. This horrible bill that's going to pass, but they don't even have 10 minutes to call their representative. So actually getting people to do something is difficult. So I would have liked to have seen that young man's energy channeled into something a little bit more productive than destroying his own life.
Well, I told you earlier, I got a lot of hate mail for that little, whatever it was, 3, 4 minute, 5 minute segment that I did on him. Cause and frankly, to be honest, to all the haters out there, everybody wants a martyr, but no one wants to get up off the couch.
Right.
And that's terribly disappointing. And I also had a lot of people attack me, by the way, for my little tongue-in-cheek comment at the end where I had the White House, the Pentagon, the Capitol building, the CIA, and said, why set yourself on fire when you can set a Fed on fire? And I had people say, Alan, that's inciting violence. That's wrong. I'm going to report this video. And I thought, okay, so these people are fine with you killing yourself, just not killing any of the bad guys. I'm sorry. Yeah. How am I the bad guy here?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That was definitely violence, right? It just was directed at himself. I mean, I guess you could say that he chose to do that, but nah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Anyway, so I don't know. I guess really what it boils down to for me is that, and same thing with the poll from earlier, is if people have such a strong opinion about, okay, well, the state is evil. And by the way, I'm not just talking about kind of our niche autistic libertarian and ANCAP audience. I mean, just the public at large. Most people don't think Jeffrey Epstein killed himself.
Right.
And I don't mean most libertarian. I mean most people. Mm-hmm. This Boeing guy, everyone on Twitter who's looking like, yeah, he didn't kill himself. They killed him. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, so if everyone very just nonchalantly agrees that, oh yeah, they had him killed, and we're not going to get into who they is, but they had him killed. It's like, okay, so you're dealing with really powerful, really evil people who will stop at absolutely nothing to get what they want. So far be it for me to tell people, like, the older I get, the more I'm like, I'm not going to scream voting is violence and all that cringe nonsense. If you want to go vote for your particular brand of authoritarianism, whatever. I hope you win so you can instill your worldview on everyone else. I mean, I guess it's better than the alternative, right? So look, I'm not here to debate that. All I'm saying is that if those people can walk into a maximum security prison and twist Epstein's head around backwards, then I don't think they're just going to go, oh, shucks, when they lose an election 51-49.
Right. Yeah, it kind of undercuts the myth that, people in government are benevolent public servants, and they're not there to make money or to have power. They're there to take care of you. And it's true. They are. Oh,
they'll take care of you, all right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what I was about to say. They are there to take care of you. Believe me. No, they're there to increase their own power and their own wealth and their own authority. And I've said this for a long time. I believe that most people who raise to high levels in politics are sociopaths. And if you go do it sometime, go Google the characteristics of a sociopath, and then compare those to the skills necessary to be a successful politician, and they line right up. So with all due respect to politicians, and with all due respect, I mean none.
Well, I think, because you and I have talked about this before, is that sure, I don't mean to be so cynical to say that you and I couldn't sit here and at least rattle off a short list of names of people that we would say, I feel pretty confident that guy is not a bloodthirsty tyrant. I don't think Thomas Massey wants to kill us if we disagree with him. I feel fairly confident in saying that. But with that said, not to be a hypocrite, I think at the same time, a lot of the issue is everyone's opinion is, oh, but not my guy.
Yeah.
My guy's not like, I mean, how did the Nancy Pelosi's and Mitch McConnell's of the world get reelected for 50 years? It's, well, of course, Congress's approval rating is 1%, but my congressman's approval rating is, it's probably only 30, but that's higher than 1%.
Right.
And so, and that is a phenomenon that stretches the generations.
Yeah. And I think it even goes a bit further. I think it's not necessarily even as much individuals, although you do have individuals that rise to that cult of personality level. But I don't think that there's a lot of people out there, even your diehard Democrats, that are like, man, Joe Biden is just the best, right? No, he's the Democrat, so we're going to vote for him.
Yeah.
And so you get this party mentality, and it's not even that my guy is okay, but it's like, well, Mitch McConnell, he's pretty horrible, but he's a Republican at least, you know. So I think you even get that phenomenon going in the whole party, red team, blue team stuff.
Well, I think, you know, there being too is that it's, on the one hand, you know, anyone, because you hear the phrases of like, you know, being perpetually off online, right? You know, you need to get off the internet, you need to go touch grass. And one of the reasons why I like to try to start some of our conversations from a really basic level and build up is because I think 99.9% of the people out there haven't ever heard of half of the things we talk about. I don't mean have a negative opinion. I mean, they don't know. They don't have an opinion on it. And I usually defend kind of the salt of the earth types because they're trying to go to work, right? They're trying to pay their bills and feed their families. It's like, look, man, I'm sure that article you wrote about CBDCs is just gosh darn interesting, but you know, rent's due and I got to be up early and I can sympathize with that. It's rational ignorance, right? You know, I'm ignorant about a lot of things, rationally or otherwise. But at the same time, I think that most people would agree with you if you were to just say, well, an election between Biden and Trump is bad because on net, most people don't want that election and most people don't want those two candidates like as a combination. They don't want to see that election. And yet in a system that allegedly is the will of the people, that's what we got.
That's what we got.
And so here we are.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you're right about the you know, rational ignorance. I spend most of my time writing about monetary policy. It's taken me years to understand monetary policy, and I still don't completely understand monetary policy. So how can I expect some guy who's just trying to, you know, whatever he's doing during the day, and he has to deliver pizzas at night because he's not making enough money doing whatever he's doing at day to pay his bills. He gets that the money's effed up, but, you know, how can I expect him to understand the intricacies of the bond market, right? I mean, it's just, there's only so much time in a day, and his time is taken up. So, you know, well, I don't know.
I think, and I'm sorry to interrupt you because that just spurred this comment that I want you to reply to, is that if you had that guy's attention right now and you said, no, look, I know that this is a lot to digest, but let me lay out this case for you. I think that even the most well-meaning person who tries their best to understand what you're throwing at them could listen and go, and then when you're done with your presentation, say, okay, well, what the hell do you want me to do about it?
That's true, and that's a fair question. Vote harder, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think there is value in people understanding. You know, I think maybe the greatest hope is that more and more people actually disengage, and just that the whole thing falls apart from lack of legitimacy. I don't know that could ever happen, but you know, I don't think you're going to vote your way to liberty or prosperity, and you know, there's so much power and corruption in the government, especially as you go into higher levels. The only thing that I can do, and this is my work, is to try to gum up the works as much as possible by using these various power sources to compete against each other and hopefully create a little bit of gridlock. But you know, maybe the greatest hope is Joe Blow, who is too busy to fathom all of this, that just doesn't even care. But then, you know, I get to the other side of that. Somebody's going to say, oh, well, like Plato said, or whoever it was, if you don't pay attention to politics, it'll certainly pay attention to you. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just want to watch hockey.
Well, on that note, but since we're running short on time, I want us to take at least a few minutes to mention the 10th Amendment Center, which of course you can find at the 10th Amendment it's just 10thamendmentcenter.com. So folks who have watched this show for long enough, I haven't exactly kept it a secret. I do some stuff for TAC every now and again. Yeah, there's this guy with black rim glasses that goes, write this. And I meekly say, yes, sir. And then he says, he was just kidding. He doesn't give a shit. But, one of the things, and I've said this before on shows, is that one of the things that I think has been a striking learning experience for me in kind of delving into the world of localization and state level politics and nullification and 10th Amendment is in particular the bill reports that I write and then send to you to totally rewrite and then upload, where so often we're looking at a bill that this isn't its first rodeo. It's been introduced a second time, a third time, a fourth time. And I don't mean with edits. Sometimes it's just a copy pasta of the previous bill, because it can be, one legislative cycle, another, just to get into a committee and then get a few more votes and then get into another committee and then get a few more votes. And then it's gone and it's away for a year or two. And then it's reintroduced by a different sponsor and it's the same bill and they give it another go. And I guess ultimately what I'm getting at is I think I think most people have no idea how the legislative cycle works at any level, but even in their own state, close to home. And two, I think a concept that's really hard for people who only see that there's an election once every 4 years between two old white guys, that they don't get how it can take generations of battling to get that one bill. And I'll turn this over to you to comment, but it reminds me, I went to an event not long ago and I was seated next to a lawyer, which of course obviously means blow my brains out, right? But he actually said, for one of the lizard people, he actually said something really profound, which was one of the toughest things about legislating, whether it be, trying to pass good legislation like raw milk or, ending a federal prohibition on anything for that matter. If you're a school choice person or if you're trying to ban CBDCs from being recognized as money in your state, whatever it is that you have to be vigilant and you have to be willing to go to war legislatively, for the censors on YouTube. You have to be willing to go at it year after year after year, session after session after session to crawl those little bitty inches. But on the other side of the coin, they only have to win once. If somebody wants to pass a bill that says, oh, well, Mike Maharrey can't do podcasts anymore, they only got to get their foot in the door one time. And the one time you don't have 51% of the votes, you're out. You've just lost a little bit of liberty. It just seems like an impossible battle to win to a lot of people. Yeah.
Well, I always go back to this quote by Thomas Jefferson. I really like it. And he said, the ground of liberty is to be gained by inches. And so we take that inch and then we press forward for what we can take additionally. And, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that if you go and put your 99999.99 into the donation at the 10th Amendment Center that you're going to get liberty. Still do it.
Yeah, I was about to say, please don't sell us short, but yeah.
But we live in a real world, right? And we all have to decide how we want to engage in it. For me, it's important to try to gain a little bit of space, even if it's just an inch, for liberty. If not for me, for my kids. And so that's why I do what I do. I can be as pessimistic as the next guy, and a lot of times I am. But
correct.
I know for a fact, yes, just ask me about the lightning. But I know for a fact that if I don't do anything, nothing's going to happen. So I do what little I can, and I hope we can gain that inch, and maybe somebody can build on that inch, and we'll get 2 inches, and maybe in 5 years we'll have at least 5 inches of liberty. That would be better than what we have now. So I'm just gonna keep on keeping on.
Well, a wise friend of mine once wrote that I don't know if I can stop the destroyers, but I can be a builder. So, Mike, on that note, where can people go to you to support you and find more of your stuff?
Well, of course, you can go to 10thamendmentcenter.com. And as you've already noted, there's no the. So just 10thamendmentcenter.com, TENTH. And if you're interested in following more of my musings on the Fed and sound money and those types of things, you can go to moneymetals.com. So that's moneymetals.com/news. And most of what is up there, not all of it, but most of that stuff up there is written by me. And if you want to buy precious metals, it's a good place to do that too. I'll throw a little shameless plug. If you want to go to my own website, michaelmaharrey.com, I haven't updated anything in a while, but my old podcast is up there and some interesting stuff. So I'm out there. You can find me.